everyone, and welcome to this Brown Bag webinar for the UC Master Gardener Program Coordinator community. Today, we'll be hearing from UC Davis ASAP, or Academic and Staff Assistance Program Director, Rob Starkey, on leading volunteers and educating the public in times of grief. COVID-19, successive wildfires, and racial trauma can create fear and anxiety in our volunteer communities and in our public communities as well. So today, we're going to have an informal conversation with Director Rob Starkey, outlining resources available to all UCANR personnel. And we'll also have some time to respond to questions from attendees about leading the volunteer community and also educating volunteers in times of grief, or educating the public, that is. I'm going to spend a few moments doing some meeting logistics and some reminders here from the statewide team, and then we'll head into some ASAP content. So Rob will have a little bit to share about the vision and mission of the ASAP organization program unit, some resources and services. I do want to note that I know we have some volunteers who are in a leadership role that are joining this call. There may be some services that are only available to UCANR staff and academics. However, the resources on the ASAP site are publicly available. So I just want to make note of that, that if you're a volunteer serving in a leadership role, you may not have access to the full suite of services that are available from ASAP. We'll have some time for an open Q&A and then some brief closing reminders. And then I'll keep this meeting open until about 1:10 today. We'll say goodbye to Rob at that point, but we'll keep it open in case folks want to have some informal conversation or sharing till about 1:10, 1:15. Okay, brief reminders. We just have 2 Brown Bag webinars / events on your calendar at the moment. September 8th will be a program coordinator or a program evaluation Brown Bag with Dr. Tamika Wilkins. And then, of course, we have our October 7th UC Master Gardener Program Personnel Annual Meeting. And I've actually created now the page for that on the UC Master Gardener Program website. Registration is live. It is going to be required for this event because we have some groups that we'll be going into, so it'll be really helpful to get your RSVP. And there's also an opportunity to share kind of your perspective on what the emerging issues and opportunities are in the volunteer engagement space. So please fill out that registration form and plan to join us. While it does look like 6 hours online is going to be a really long time online, I promise that we're going to build in some breaks and some small group time. So don't worry, we'll keep in mind that 6 hours on Zoom is far too long. Reappointment resources. We have about 2 weeks remaining in our reappointment period. Contact me if you have any questions, and please, utilize the resources that are on the UC Master Gardener Program Coordinator website. Thanks to everyone who joined our kind of informal reappointment help session last week, and thanks to Lauren for her support there. Of course, we have our volunteer selection resources that went public at the end of May. A couple new things, as I mentioned in our last Brown Bag webinar, the gender options have been updated. You can download the new versions, but also please link to the new versions on the program coordinator site and on the site that is maintained by Robin's team. And Missy has some information about that, the why behind that on CT. I also want to mention that Qualtrics accounts are now available for generic UCANR email addresses. I have a post on CT explaining that. But if you're curious about learning more, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. So this is an option for those counties that maybe have volunteers who manage the volunteer selection process. You can create an additional Qualtrics account in addition to your personal one for those volunteers that may be involved in the process. And of course, one more plug for Melissa Womack's amazing 2019-2020 impact report featuring great stories submitted by program managers and coordinators throughout the state. So check out that document. It's a really exciting story of our program. And with that, I want to frame a little bit of today's discussion, and then I'll stop sharing my screen and turn it over to Rob. So the motivation behind this webinar actually arose probably more than a year ago when Mimi Enright, our UC Master Gardener Program Coordinator in Sonoma County, asked kind of this question or a similar question during an initial Brown Bag that we held about responding to the COVID-19 crisis. And she asked this question: how do we create and hold community during crisis? So that motivated us a year later while we're kind of, digging out and figuring out what our priorities are, to connect with ASAP, to connect with Rob, to ask about the themes that he's seeing emerging in workplace and also public education spaces that may be helpful to us as we think about rejoining our volunteers in person and online, and also continuing our public education. So ASAP's confidential cost-free services include counseling and referral to outside organizations, some consultation for managers and supervisors, and all of you on this call are managers and supervisors of volunteers, so of unpaid staff, and maybe some of that may be useful to you. And then finally, these resources, as I mentioned earlier, are available to faculty and staff, and I suppose in some cases, some immediate family members. I do want to mention that when we talk about volunteer conflict resolution, we often talk about not speculating about what might be going on for any individual volunteer. And that's still the case here. You know, we don't want to make assumptions about what an individual may or may not be dealing with. And no kind of personal crisis is an excuse for harassment, discrimination, hate, or bias that may harm another individual. So make sure to keep that in mind. We do have other resources like HDAP that we can engage, like risk and safety services that we can engage in situations that are really acute and concerning. But I'm hoping Rob today will help us think broadly about, okay, we've had a variety of different experiences over the last year that have been really, really difficult, that have involved a lot of grief and crisis. And how can we think about that? How can we be informed when we're entering into spaces where we're educating the public and managing our volunteers? How can we do that with compassion and attention to our current climate? So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I'll introduce Dr. Rob Starkey. Rob.
Hi, everyone. I'm Rob. I'm a psychologist with ASAP over on the UC Davis campus. So I'm going to pull in, going to go over ASAP services and then and just talk about how we might be of assistance to you. Both individually, but then also in your roles as leaders. And then we can kind of just open the floor and just kind of chat and talk about ways to support each other, support your teams, your volunteer teams, and just kind of get through all this life and certainly COVID times for yourselves. So I'm going to open that up. Let's see here. Okay. So, hold on, sorry. There we go. So, we are what's called a employee assistance program. They're pretty common with most large organizations. And the idea is basically that our employees are human and therefore they will have struggles, both in the personal and in their work lives at times. We want to support them. Obviously, the main thing is we want to support them because we care for them, but also there's also financial reasons why they're actually pretty helpful. Keeping people in their jobs, less in turnover, that sort of thing. Actually, they were originally designed for substance abuse issues amongst employees and recognition that could create safety issues and obviously the distress of the individual themselves. So we do service Davis campus as well as A&R. And we service faculty, staff, postdocs, and then immediate family members and that are adults in the household. So we'll do couples counseling, we'll do family counseling with adult kids, and they come in individually as well. So it's a brief model, typically up to 5 sessions, and people come in for a variety of reasons, often personal related or work related, obviously, and a lot of those times, those kind of merge a bit, particularly for people working from home during these times. So perennially, the top issues are depression, anxiety, issues with their supervisor, issues with their supervisee, and issues with their spouse. Those are kind of our top ones. And for the most part, they've kind of stayed the same. Anxiety has probably been really, really high during COVID. That's been a big one. And then for a lot of people during COVID, especially childcare issues, trying to work, do your job as well as teach, as well as parent, as well as be a partner, and as well as keep your sanity, which is not so easy. So, but anyway, so we're there for you, and also we don't serve the volunteers themselves, but we could help you help them, and we'll have a conversation about that later on. Crisis intervention, if you're really worried about someone, you can get them into us. So we're all virtual right now. We're typically located in a little house in Davis. I know most of you aren't, in Davis proper, so For you, probably won't make much of a difference. But we offer phone or Zoom sessions. We're located just on the east side of campus, First and A Streets. We're not technically on campus. And we get people referrals. We can support you. We can get referrals using your insurance. We are a no-cost benefit to employees and their immediate families. But we can also provide referrals for people using their insurance, trying to find therapists, substance abuse treatment, eating disorder treatment, depression, bipolar, whatever it might be. We can support people with that. A part then that really I think might apply to you is you can consult with us on personnel issues, essentially. So if you're worried about someone's mental health, maybe there's a lot of conflict with this person, maybe they seem down, or just worried about their state of mind, potential substance abuse issues, irritability, whatever it might be, we can help you maybe have a game plan to more effectively manage these folks, including sometimes setting boundaries and having conversations with people about, okay, we're worried about you, but also worried about you for you. So we want to support you on the one hand, but we also want to get you the help you need for your sake as well as others, because it's causing some distress. We also do threat assessments, so it's not a common thing, but there are people that we interact with at times that maybe make people a little nervous. Maybe they talk about guns a lot, or they talk about someone gets into an interaction, they say, you better watch your back, or I'm going to get you, or people get into a scuffle or something like that. We can help assess risk there, and then maybe we can make a game plan for folks. Crisis intervention for groups. I have done that with after the Paradise fire. I went up to Orville and met with some of the folks up there who were dealing with a lot of trauma from that, both for themselves, but also with the people they worked with. And so we can do stuff like that as well. Often, though, we do those for groups, do it for those instances, but also for if there's a untimely loss of a team member of some sort, someone passes away young or in a tragic way, we'll do what we call grief debriefs, which is just facilitate an opportunity for people to process and join together to support each other through a painful time. And then psychoeducational programs and trainings, workshops, stress management, whatever else you can imagine, emotional intelligence, de-escalation, conflict management, whatever it might be. So that's kind of the main stuff. So it's a no-cost, confidential, voluntary offering. Confidential means can't tell anyone you're a client. Can't tell, if you were to refer someone to us, we can't tell you that they became a client or not. So we can't confirm or deny. We certainly can't disclose what someone talks about. That stays within ASAP itself. Our rules for confidentiality are basically the same as they are for someone in private practice. If you call someone, someone in private practice that you think, your partner's talking to or anyone else, they can't say that the person is a client, let alone disclose what you talked about. There are a couple of things that do legal responsibilities that do preclude that, though. One would be just someone signs a release. Someone says, yeah, it's okay, Rob, you can talk to this person about what's going on with me. The other ones are harm to self, suicidality, harm to others, homicidality, and child abuse or adult abuse. Otherwise, things just stay on site. You can certainly refer people to us, but it is voluntary. Yeah, so that's kind of the main stuff. Therapists, psychologists, MFTs, LCSWs, so social workers, marriage and family therapists, and we also have postdocs. We serve campus, health, UCANR, and adult family members. That's kind of the main bit. So, any questions for me?